idea is that all of us are gathering around crossings. With this session especially, it's titled Synthesizing Synapses. And as we know, synapses are those little gaps in our brain where the neurons jump to create new connections. So the whole idea is, how do intersectional practices, interdisciplinary thinking, help us create those new bridges, or help us kind of, jump over those gaps? The idea also is that, how do we, in an age especially where interdisciplinarity, interconnection, interdependence, these words are being increasingly valued and encouraged in our practices and in our being, is design something that becomes a new language, a new tool, or a new medium through which to traverse all these different kinds of frontiers and domains? And the group of people that you have, you see right next to me on the stage, they are invited because each of them have a very interesting and a very unique practice that probably kind of gets them to live with these intersections in their work on an everyday basis. So without reading out your bios, if I may actually ask each of you to just introduce briefly what you do. And while you do that, if you can also add a little bit of information so that we all understand the intersections you deal with on an everyday basis, what is that one thing, one intersectional thing that best describes your practice? Could we start with you, Leo?
Thank you, Samta. Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm the founder of a studio called 59, about 25 years old. Not me, the studio, despite obviously appearances to the contrary, I wish. And we started very much I'm an English literature graduate, but sort of previously studied design. And I started with a musician, a stage director, me, a graphic designer, or so I thought at the time, and a composer. And really, it fell apart very quickly. Nobody really knew what we were doing. But nevertheless, over the subsequent sort of 5-10 years, we rebuilt that studio with other collaborators. And we've become, we absolutely describe ourselves as an interdisciplinary design studio. We employ about 65 people within the 59 studio. And they span everything from architects, who've been through full architecture, stage 3 architecture training, video designers and animators, technical designers and systems designers, lighting designers and sound designers, and then we back that up with a production team and producing team and business affairs. So the other thing that's happened to us very recently is that we've joined a global design agency called Journey, which is made of 4 studios, of which 59 is just one. So we're really pushing the envelope on interdisciplinarity in design disciplines, because those studios don't so much cross over with what we do, but like nudge up against it. So we're now pushing out, worldwide. We've got 5 studios, 5 locations across the globe, 300 strong team. So we're, it's a massive experiment in a way, very exciting one.
Thank you, Cher.
Great. I think I'll start with the intersection. So although they don't seem too disparate, really, I think through a whole host of different careers, the kind of intersection that I've maybe been working at is design and futures. So I began as a kind of a creative consultant and then creative lead at WGSN, which, if any of you know, is it's a forecasting agency. And then moved across to the V&A. So I was here for almost 10 years, actually, as a design researcher with the kind of remit of emerging design futures. And then across to Future Observatory at the Design Museum, which you will have possibly heard about in relation to the More Than Human exhibition that's on at the moment. And then very, very recently was invited to move across to the Sainsbury's Family Trusts, who, as you'll know, are major arts funders in the UK, but they fund, they tend to fund heritage, so, museum wings, etc. But are very interested in setting up a new, very kind of progressive trust that looks at possible futures for culture, and specifically regenerative futures. So there is, a kind of inherent interdisciplinarity in all of those kind of roles, really, in that they're all scoping roles, essentially. And working across design, architecture, anthropology, ecology, psychology. And I suppose we can explore some of those as we go through the conversation.
Absolutely, and I think for you I have a specific question coming up, which is going a little bit beyond intersectionality and towards interdependence. So just a heads up if you want to think about it before I bring it at you in the next few minutes.
It's okay.
Yeah. So Freya, thank you.
Hello. Yes, I'm Freya, and I've been at Google now for almost a decade, and I run a lab at Google that's part of Google Arts and Culture, which is an initiative where we have like a platform and we explore new technologies to working with we have like over 4,000 partners in over 80 countries, cultural partners, to encourage kind of new ways to explore and connect with culture online. And our lab is specifically focused on, it came about actually from some of our cultural partners who said if we were like engaging with Google, what we'd actually like to do is be able to experiment. And so our focus is on supporting experimentation with artists, and so we've worked with the Design Festival and with museums, and looking at application of emerging technologies for culture and what that can look like, and supporting experimentation in this space.
Thank you, Freya. Amit.
Hi, thank you, Samta. Thank you for all for being here. I know it's a Saturday and a weekend, and with so much turmoil in the city. I'm Amit Gupta. I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of Ster. Ster, as names says it all. It's stirring up a thought process, stirring up creative exchanges, ideas, places, geographies. The thematic of synthesizing synapses fits in beautifully with what Ster also stands for at the intersection of various creative disciplines. I mean, today when we have Studio 59, where there's multiple disciplines coming together, and that was one of the biggest thought behind creating a platform like Ster, where we break the silos of various creative disciplines we are taught to be in, and then welcome how exchanges can happen, collaboration can happen, connections can happen. And these connections are actually what we say could be beyond the biological, mechanical, neuro, scientific development, but very, very powerful development, keeping the empathy in mind, the emotions in mind, the stories in mind, the narratives in mind. And that's the reason when we break down Ster, we talk about see and be seen, think and probe thinking, questions. That's one of the critical aspects of a platform that we really want people to ask, and not just ask. An artificial intelligence which is giving you information from the data that has collected, but ask from empathetic perspective, ask from context, which we are today living in every day, and it's changing by the second. And then inspire and reflect, when it's inspire and be inspired and reflect within and around. So that's where we are, and that's how we've progressed for last 6 years now, and today enjoy being part of a global creative community. Thank you.
Thank you, Amit. So I'll start with Freya, the first question coming your way. But also, this is the first question because we are honoring the occasion, which is London Design Festival, which officially opens to the public today. And often, probably the people in this room and a few of us here, when we hear the word design, we think of design not just objects anymore, not just a designed, tangible, touchable, usable, discardable object. But we think about design in so many interesting ways in terms of a way of inhabiting the world that we are in, a way of interacting with people across. So coming from the broader context, Freya, with the work, the position that you currently hold, and the work that you're doing with Google Arts and Culture, so essentially when you hear that name, Google Arts and Culture, you immediately think about technology, art, and culture coming together. But I'm sure there's a lot of design, and the design aspects that allow you to do the work that you do, whether it is design within technology or design of how you bring these collaborations, with the institutions you work with and people together. So can you reflect upon that a little bit?
Yeah, thank you. And design is really critical because if we just, and I think sometimes, there can be tendencies, particularly, let's just take at the moment, we're in this there's kind of a rapid advancement. If we just kind of look at some, the AI models, every 2 weeks, I can barely keep up with it. There's kind of new things coming out. And when we look at that in terms of how we also experience the world, without design, you kind of lose the human connection and understanding. And the tech can then just overshadow it and feel a little bit like tech for tech's sake, which is very much what we're always focused on, and why I personally see myself as a facilitator. And I feel it's a privileged position where there are so many wonderful thinkers and makers in the world across, artists, whether you class yourself as an artist, a designer, curator, like a archivist, and looking at or a technologist, and how to bring those together to help with our kind of shared understanding of the world. And maybe just one example, we work a lot with archives and our partners' archives. And it's a question we often ask, is in terms of exploring new ways to connect with kind of, vast archives. Unless you're an expert, you might not be kind of engaging with. And I think it's that design plays such a critical role in when we're thinking about kind of complex information systems and where that meets human understanding. And I also think experimentation and space for experimentation, I've got a huge backlog of things that you could say failed or we've tried and just actually that isn't right, and you kind of move on. And I think it's really important when we're looking at how we interact with our world and with kind of our rich culture and shared culture, is how we, how we connect with that, and how design helps us just create that kind of human connection. And so just one last thing I was going to say is, when you were saying about design, also, it does look at from user experience and user interaction, so in that broadest sense. And that's where most projects, I think, fall down, is when it comes to, around that kind of user experience.
Yeah.
I actually love that. I haven't heard somebody say it in such a simple way, but the fact that design is what keeps it human and keeps from technology totally taking over, I think that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And Amit, because you work pretty much in a lot in the digital space as well, with still being a digital media house, do you want to expand upon this question a little bit? How does design help you traverse or bridge these, intersections between design, architecture, art, performing arts, and everything else that, your platform talks about?
Design is actually synthesis of...
Mike.
Sorry. Design actually is synthesis of various synapses. It mediates tension, it creates framework, it's a powerful tool to choreograph connections. And that's where we as a media brand, that's where we as a knowledge creator and dissemination, we actually synthesizing knowledge. And for us, being at the role which media plays and the role which media needs to play is not just putting things out there as they are, but actually enabling a dialogue or a discourse or question that narrative. And that's what design can actually facilitate. So design, it's a very broad term, where today we're talking about a connection between human intelligence and artificial intelligence. At the same time, we're talking about connection between non-human entities, species, which we are living with. It's one of my proud things to say that when you pick up a spoonful of soil, there's much more life there than 8.4 billion people on this planet Earth. Can design simulate connection with that? Can design make collaboration with that life, that species? And can we as a media brand put it out there to enable that dialogue? Yeah, and I think that's a powerful tool which a media can play in the world of design.
Thank you. Leo, if I can come back to you again, because when you were introducing your studio earlier, you spoke about all different kinds of disciplines which are held within the studio and the 4 sort of sister studios with whom you work. If I have to ask you, even though you've been doing this for 25 years or more, in the last 5 years, if you have to think about or share with us one particular sort of interdisciplinary collaboration or contamination that truly changed your practice or impacted your practice, what would you say?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the obvious project for me, and the one I'd like to talk about, is a collaboration we did with Foster and Partners, the architects, on the pavilion for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for the Osaka World Expo in Japan. It's on at the moment, actually. If anybody happens to be in Osaka, go check it out. The reason it was extraordinary, it was just, you know, we had a sort of ongoing dialogue with Foster's, and they sent through a couple of briefs, including for the UK pavilion, that we'd sort of been discussing, working with them on. The Saudi one was by far the most interesting one we looked at. It was, as far as I can tell, primarily created by Dr. Simaya, incredible woman, runs the architecture and design commission. And what she said, we joined the initial briefing call, and we were a bit like, oh, do we, you know, this is a nation branding thing, we don't, you know, it's not our story, do we really want to be involved in telling it? Are we even qualified, or indeed, you know, from an appropriation point of view, is this the right kind of project for us? And what she said in the briefing, which is pretty much become my mantra now, is that she wanted storytelling embedded in the fabric of the building, not layered on top. And that's what had sort of, in a way, like freaked Foster's out. It's like, how do we do that? and they came to us because we've been in dialogue about, I suppose, visitor experience design, but in the loosest possible sense. Like, what's the building for? What is it literally saying in its being, but also in its experience, and and what's it representing? So it was incredible provocation. We had absolutely no way how to address it other than just to do what we do, which is to like dig deep and try and find the stories that need telling, and then, but critically, and I think where we differ maybe from a consultancy, there are many great consultancies who have really fantastic sort of thinking processes out there, but we do this thing, and this goes for all the Journey studios in a way. We take stuff from thought to thing. From like, okay, well, that's all very well to say, you know, what's the core that for example, a nation like Saudi Arabia might want and be able to say about itself, but how does that manifest in the physical and real world in a way that people can experience it in person? And it was a very, very simple answer that we came up with, and this was very much born between us and the partners at Foster's, was that it's like, what is the challenge? This is where, you know, design comes in. You know, it happened to be an intellectual process, but it was the key part of the design process. What are the challenges of an expo? It's like, well, it's a very noisy environment. Everyone's shouting very loud. There's all sorts of contrasting things placed next to each other. There's massive queues. There's huge amounts of like timing problems and weather problems, this, that, and the other. So it's like white noise. And you've got a very, very busy set of people who may be committed in that they're there, they bought a ticket, they've shown up, but actually they want to tick off 150 pavilions in 3 days or whatever it is, or, you know, worse, 20 pavilions in 1 day. So how do you make an impact quickly? And we just decided that, and also why? Like, what's it for? What does the nation have to gain from, it was, I think, something like 87% Japanese visitors. Like, so why? What is the relationship that can be built between the nation of Saudi and we decided what it was essentially just breaking down the barriers to understanding, and rather than trying to make an exhibition about Saudi Arabia, this is sort of the outcome, if you like. We decided that we wanted to create meaningful connections between the people of Saudi Arabia and the people of Japan, or the visitors to Expo internationally. And the only way we could think to do that quickly and effectively in that environment, where you might, if you're lucky, have 20 minutes to do that really fast, was to bring real people together. So instead of creating an exhibition about a place, we brought the people of Saudi, the designers, the artists, the musicians, to Osaka. We created a studio, effectively, for them, an interdisciplinary studio, music studio, sound studio. And then every day we captured the material they were doing, and we created a nightly show that's projected in the courtyard that hundreds of people can see simultaneously. So it's like it became more of a social organism than a pavilion in a way. And and it radically altered our practice. A, because we realized that we had something big to offer that world of like how to use design to represent a nation or represent a people, and B, because we had to work harder on that. But we did everything right up to the detailing of the material junctions in the studios of the galleries, but it started with this big thought, and it ended with, which cable plugs into which monitor, plugs into which speaker, plugs in, is that oak or is it, and so it used every muscle that the studio had to offer. And to be honest, also, it was the thing that made me go, we've either got to grow to do more work like this, or we've got to shrink because it's going to kill us if we keep trying to work like this. So that's what engendered the Journey collaboration.
That's amazing, thank you. And that takes me to you, Cher, and the previous, the heads up that I had given. Because we all, of course, talk about intersections quite a bit in the work that we do, because we do want to encourage them. But I recently about 2 years back, read this really amazing book by Arturo Escobar. You know what I'm talking about, Designs for the Pluriverse. And I think that's where he introduced the idea, it was not his own, it was one of his collaborators, about radical interdependence. That not just the fact that, we are interconnected, but the very fact that we are, or things are the way they are, because they are radically interdependent. And which means that they are constantly changing, moving, shifting. It's never static. In that sense, and because I do know the trajectory that you've had, especially within the design futuring discourse, the work that you have been doing, can you share that nuanced difference between interconnection and interdependence, how you see that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I gave a bit of thought to that, actually, because you gave me a heads up even before, so I thought about it on the train. And I suppose maybe I think that interconnection maybe is an observation. Like, I think there's something about, like, there's a recognition. Maybe that's what it is as an act. So I think maybe, it's about recognizing a connection with another field or discipline or a person's, maybe it's about overlaps. So if I could give an example from my own practice, maybe I would say that it was kind of illustrated by a book that I wrote with Stuart Candy, which was, he's a futures studies expert. At the time, I was working at the V&A, very much lodged in the world of design. And our kind of premise for the book was future studies is a fascinating discipline. It is all about the frameworks of how we future and how we think and how we build worlds. And yet it doesn't have a huge influence on the world because it remains in graphic representations and reports. And design has a huge impact on the world because it is in the world, of the world. It is what we operate within. But it doesn't always give enough thought to the kinds of worlds that it produces or the kinds of mythology that it advances or the kinds of economies that it engages, for example. And so there was a kind of bit of work to do in terms of bringing those two disciplines together and thinking, how can your native language kind of come into our world and our native language come into yours? So that, I would say, was interconnection. But moving across to the Design Museum, our kind of major theme at Future Observatory really became more than human. And that's just a much more complicated thing to really begin to kind of navigate, because that isn't about, oh, there's an interesting observed connection between human beings and nature. That is a major ontological shift. I mean, the whole thing there is that you are fundamentally embedded in the greater kind of world of life and ecosystems, which weirdly enough sounds so obvious, but just somehow isn't that obvious to the way that we operate in our day-to-day kind of capacity. So that, I would say, is interdependence, where it's like, if you cut the string, it's not that the disciplines float away from each other. If you cut the string, the fabric unravels. And so I suppose maybe it's just about that idea of, I suppose maybe where one is an observation, the other is maybe a responsibility and an approach to life. Mm.
Beautiful, thank you. Yeah. In fact, maybe this is a question I could ask each of you to answer. Do you how would you define, I mean, it just helps us with our vocabulary of values, that how do you differentiate interdependence and interconnection? Would any of you like to, take that up? Yeah.
I can give it I suppose interdependence makes me think of symbiosis, I suppose, and the fact that the host and the symbiont kind of need each other to survive, but also to thrive. And so there's both the kind of the potential downside of that and the potential conflict of being dependent, but also the potential upside of greater than the sum of its parts, I suppose. And that's where interdependence has its sort of the sort of potential spark for inspiration comes from. It's like we all kind of really need, sorry, it sounds trite, we all really need each other, obviously, but in a sort of professional sense or in a practice sense, if we're not, sparking off in the synapse gaps between the two different things, then where do you find the new ideas, I suppose?
Yeah, I think you can, just when you were saying that was making me think, just when you approach anything, kind of in any collaboration in life or like any approach, just even think of like a project, could be anything. And that if all the people don't have a kind of a stake in it or a dependency in it, then that's the only way for it to, I think, ever truly be kind of meaningful and successful. however you want to define that success, but successful for all the sum of its parts. And that's where I think like independency as human, to move things forward. I don't know, there's something there in terms of that we need it to, we need to feel a stake in something, and then that very quickly starts coming into a dependency. I don't know, I think it's interesting.
And makes me think of the very values of the commons as well. I mean, even though the myth of the tragedy of the commons has been busted, and rightly so, but the fact that unless you truly have a stake, how do you ever see it grow or go forward? Yeah, Amit?
I think interconnectedness is more of collective sharing, collective weave of a fabric, as you were saying. Interdependence is more individualistic and confined to who is transacting or who is into the transactional place of using that sharing information or stories or creation. So simply put, interconnectedness could be creating togetherness collectively, more plural. Interdependence is more, could be very singular.
Very interesting, actually, yeah. That one is about the collective and coming together, and the other is about inspecting its impact on the individual. Yeah, that's amazing. I would actually like to take that to the room. Does anybody in the room want to share what they think of the two? Please do contribute to the conversation. It'll be amazing to hear from you. But if not, I don't have the timer here. How are we doing on time, Elizabeth?
34 minutes past.
Okay, great, fine. All right, so I should also move ahead very quickly. Okay, so the next bit is actually bringing me back to you, Freya, because I have been very interested in the work of Google Arts and Culture, because I was personally doing a project which was kind of researching about how to build, because I'm very interested in the commons, not just as resources, but also a framework for reorganizing social interactions. And in that sense, we were looking at what would a digital commons look like? And I think in some ways the work that Google Arts and Culture is doing is pooling all these things together from different institutions, different partners, and making it accessible to the wider public through technology, which is becoming more and more sort of accessible more easily around the world. So in that sense, if we can call, without putting any pressure on you at all, but if we can say, if I look at it as part museum, part archive, part creative playground, I don't know if you resonate with that at all in describing Google Arts and Culture.
Yeah, I mean, I never see us as a museum, because I see us as a platform that is, all of the content on the platform is partners, so cultural, so from museums to foundations, etc. And so that's owned by the partners. It's more a space to kind of to bring together, because often, I mean, I find it, when I want to learn about a let's just the other day with my 6-year-old, he was like, I want to understand everything, how it's been invented since the beginning of time. And we would, we even have a project on arts and culture called Inventions and Discovery, which brings together loads of different content on this. But it wasn't perfect, because I was like, I can't find anything really that helps me kind of chart this in a kind of coherent way. There's, and so I think in terms of having a space where, rather than having to go to lots of different places, and there's a place for that as well, but being able to, I guess it's that serendipitous discovery, and that's kind of what we try to do. And this is why we then look at applying kind of digital technologies. A number of years ago, we had something that was really popular called the art selfie. And you took a picture of yourself, and you found your doppelganger in a museum, and millions of people did this, and it didn't just surface kind of really well-known artworks. It surfaced, from the tiniest museums, like all over the world. And people were then actually, in some cases, going to these museums, if they were more local to them, and trying to find, their artwork physically. And that, for me, is where what we're doing is, that's what it's about. It's about finding those kind of access points. And then that's where, so that art selfie kind of started in my lab as just experimentation and looking at how can we find those different access points. So that's what we try to do.
Thank you. But again, coming to you, Amit, with that, because we're talking about design, we're talking about interconnection, we're talking about interdisciplinarity, and storytelling, in a way, is at the core of all of that. And essentially, the work that, again, you do, a part of it, a large part of it at least, is about maybe not always telling the stories, but holding a lot of stories, as a platform. So if you have to talk about, Stir, especially the editorial platform, stirworld.com, which is not just a witness to creativity, but also an active synthesizer. Do you ever see it kind of acting as a synthesizer of synapses? And how do you navigate that as at a global scale? Because I do understand the platform basically started small, because I've been a part of it, full disclosure. But the fact that it is a global platform today, and you've got people everywhere, how do you kind of think about building something like that, which you want should be plural and inclusive and diverse, but also at a global scale? I think that idea of scale, can you talk about how do you traverse that?
Yes, so one of the most important thought process when we were putting this, or the curatorial aspect of what STIR should stand for, is that how do we break geographies and the boundaries? We understand that the person or a creator of any creative form or part of any creative discipline in Saudi would think different than would think in Brazil would think different, or in China would think different, or in India would think different. But ultimately, they're all creator. There's one common language between them of talking something which there is a latent desire to produce or to create or to make things evolve from where they are. When we figured that out, we figured out that it's important that we cannot say that we are an Indian platform or an American platform or a British platform or a Chinese platform. How can we connect the global community together? And that's one of the reasons we don't have one editor. We have editors sitting across various parts of the country. We have 78 writers today sitting across in various parts of the world, giving information to us. One more thing which was very important for us is that while we are maybe a news platform or telling stories in what is happening in the world of creative community, we said we're not into creating, let's break the news today, So we're not into breaking a news. We said we will absorb what is being done or what has happened. We will understand where the gravity of what's been created, and then come back, think about it, talk to the writers, talk to the opinion makers, talk to the people who have a perspective on a view on what has been created, and then throw an analysis out. Because just to put a news out there, it's very easy today. If you just want information, there are multiple platforms today which will give you information from Google to ChatGPT to now 300 other platforms which are evolving every day. How do we absorb all that information and then disseminate a perspective on that information, and also disseminate what that observation needs to be, how it needs to be humanized or non-humanized, keeping the other aspect of the life on the planet, keeping that in mind. So one of that's basic curatorial thought behind STIR. That can we become a truly global platform and be country agnostic or race agnostic or gender agnostic, and that's where we are sitting at the core of what STIR stands for.
And I think, just very quick, I think we need that more than ever in terms of the role of the curator and being able to, you know, with this huge, there's so much information for us all to absorb, and I think more and more we need kind of platforms like yours. You know, so.
Thank you.
Unfortunate bit is there's a huge trademark between, oh, how many readers you have and how many followers do we have, versus who is following you and who is reading you. It's a number versus, and that's a dilemma, and therefore the sustenance becomes equally challenging.
Because we are really short on time, anybody in the room wants to say something, ask something, contribute? If not, is there somebody there? Okay, great.
Thank you very much. My name is Salla Heinänen. I come from Finland. I represent Finnish designers, so a little bit, maybe not so on your discussion and debate type what you're having, but this kind of a designers discussions we have a lot, and you had a lot of interesting topics to take on board to Finland. But how much do you yourself discuss with the C-level? Because you have so much information, skills, curatorial knowledge, that is the interdependency and interconnection between development and how much it's in the C-level? Because I would see that all these kind of discussions that you have should also be in the C-level discussions.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
Do you mean like C-suite?
Yeah.
Executive
Yeah.
level? C-suite, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I've just joined a
My
big company.
Finnish.
I know much more about C-suites than I used to. That's a really, sorry, do you mind if I take that something? So CEO, for example, Chief Executive Officer, and COO, Chief Operating Officer, so C-suite. So it's this executive level of the management of certain structures of companies. It's actually more, I think, more used in the US than it is in the UK. We'd generally call CEO Managing Director, but it's essentially the executive level of management, I think, if I'm correctly interpreting. Yeah, well, it's a really interesting question for us. It's a very hot topic at the moment because, you know, we used to have a very simple management structure. It was all founders, our business, it was all founder-led. And we were all practitioners. So, and that, you know, in a way made it very clear for all of the artists and designers and professionals who were working for us what they were signing up for and who they were working with. Because, you know, we didn't have a separate management structure that kind of dictated business planning and corporate policy. So it really has consistently always been for 23.5 years in service of the work. Like, how do we find the best opportunities and then how do we deliver them? So we talked an awful lot about it because the C-suite, as it was, the equivalent of the C-suite in our business were people making the work. So it was sort of happening in dialogue on a day-to-day basis. Now that's different in a sense. Now we've joined Journey. We still have that at studio level, but I'm also particularly interested. I've now become part of the C-suite of our bigger agency and part of the board. And I'm really interested to see how much that conversation about these big issues, you know, about what design is, what it can do, interconnectivity, interdependence, you know, synthesis, and etc. Like how much that will continue to be the case in a business that, you know, is much bigger and has a business structure. Now, it's interesting because there are other founders in the executive like myself, so of the other studios, who are very, very interested in having those conversations about you know, why we're doing what we do, and how we can do it better. What it means to be designing, what quality means to us, for example, what success means. But of course, we also have other voices who are sort of equally knowledgeable, but in their own areas of expertise, like finance, like corporate structure, like financing. That is obviously a whole different, you know, vocabulary and conversation to be had. And there is a tension between those things. Now, I personally find that quite healthy, not least because I think all of my colleagues quite enjoy productive conflict. So I think it's like, yes, we can absolutely do that, but why? You know, let's make a great piece of work, but like, why would we do that? Like, why would we, for example, spend our own money on a low-budget theatre project when we could be, you know, doing a high-value but anonymous architectural project over here, for example? And the answer quite frequently is really good. It's like, well, we're doing that because it gives us access to the next opportunity in both of those areas, whereas if we just do this one, no one will ever know about it, but we'll make, you know, better EBITDA for that year or whatever. So I enjoy those conversations. I don't think they happen enough, is my experience so far. I would like them to happen more. I can't speak for other companies, but my guess is they happen even less in those areas. But there's a strong sense of, you know, I'm excited about it. I don't think it can go away. And I think by putting practitioners into executive level roles, then you sort of force that conversation in a way that's really, really good.
Thank you for answering that, but also thank you for asking that, because it's really interesting how tensions is something between two things, which I think, at least I look at it as a very fertile ground for innovation. Because if we don't have that tension, and we don't have those questions and those sort of, we don't always have to celebrate everything. But unless we are uncomfortable or there is discomfort, how do we think anew and get out of our comfort zone? So thank you for asking that. Sorry, Freya, please do add.
I was just going to say, just in response to that, because I also think it's about making space for that dialogue and how you do it. And one of the things we were looking at last year is how to, there's obviously a lot of conversation around kind of AI and creativity and the impact on the creative industries. And so we started these like round tables, and at the Serpentine Galleries we brought together curators and artists. And I brought in the COO of DeepMind, the chief kind of research scientist developing like these models. And there wasn't a tangible outcome, and I think it's about being comfortable that there's not always an immediate tangible outcome, but having that space just for that conversation and to hear the different perspectives. Just building on what you said, I think it's really important.
Thank you, I know that we're just about out of time, but maybe we can just take 2 minutes extra to share that one of the intentions to have this conversation was also to see if we can, we've always spoken about design as a tool, design as a medium, but if we start talking about design as a language, the idea was to try and ask all of you and maybe people in the room that what are the new vocabularies or grammars that are emerging at the intersections that you work at, which could define a new design language? Is there something any of you would like to share instantly, or this is also something that we can all continue to think about?
Well, I think everyone said it, Amit in particular, and yourself, like story. I think, story is kind of the way we connect with each other in a way.
I think also, so there's like co-creation, but also something that I think is a debatable term is around kind of algorithmic aesthetics. And I think that's an interesting.
I would say language of trust. Can we design trust, or can we trust design? That's a line written by one of our writer, an architect. But I think what is evolving and what needs much more thinking from all of us is that can we create a language of trust?
Thank you. Cher?
I don't know, maybe the word that we just keep circling around over and over again, like in the last couple of months, is this word regenerative. And I know it's used a lot in design, but I think really just trying to understand it is quite interesting. We bandy the word around ecosystem, like we all work in an ecosystem, But there are so many different kinds of ecosystems, and we never really kind of categorize those ecosystems. Or, of course, when you think about like regenerative farming and the ease with which farmers speak about, the gut microbiome moving into the soil, moving into the food, moving into the general kind of well-being of a society, I think those are things that design can really learn from. I feel like maybe we aren't at the edge there. Designers aren't at the edge of that kind of thinking, and we've got a lot to learn.
Thank you. Does anybody want to quickly throw something at us in the room over there?
Hi. So as a student in art direction now, I just thought about what is this design language, with AI, with all this digital world that we live in. You said about collaborations. How to, sorry, I have to articulate my question. So how to think about collaborations in a digital world, and how to think about as a designer critically? Because you said about design is critical. So how to, I don't know how to express that, but for example, I know 59 Studio that you collaborate with a lot of different studios out there. How to think about in 2 or 3 years from now, AI will maybe do something completely different, and how to think about design as not only as art directors but as a creatives. Do you understand?
Essentially, are you talking about, especially in the digital realm, how do collaborations, how can, as a designer, as a human designer, you can instigate collaborations to happen?
Yeah, in collaborations in digital world right now, because we don't know that we just speak with a lot of people out there in the digital world, and we don't know if now we spoke with people.
Yeah. So
Right
basically,
now.
how do you get started?
Something like
How
that.
do you kind of start with the project in which you want collaboration to be at the core of it? Would you or anybody like to? Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, boringly for us, I'm afraid, we still bring people physically together. And, there was definitely a period when, especially post-COVID, when it was like, hey, we don't need to do this anymore. We save on all of the carbon expended and all of the air miles and everything. It's like actually, I mean, I've just spent 2 weeks casting a musical in a rehearsal room and whatever. And it's like the energy of like direct one-to-one interactions. The moment I go onto Zoom to try and cast someone because they're not available in London, it just like, it's, I literally don't know what to do. So building those, I mean, again, it's the same philosophy I was espousing with the pavilion that I was talking about. Unless you can actually, I don't know yet how to replicate that, I suppose is what I'm saying. I don't think VR gets us there. I don't think Zoom gets us there. I don't think our phones get us there really, although in spite of the frequency. So I maybe I'm just lacking imagination, but I can't quite imagine a world in which we're, at least with people we haven't met yet, building new collaborations effectively and quickly, the maximum thing without some degree of proximity. But I'm probably a bit...
I do think you can. I spend most of my time on remote kind of collaborations, and like before COVID, that was the way we worked. We had a screen kind of in every meeting, and I find that we can actually be effective, and have those relationships with collaborators I haven't met. Of course, nothing actually beats kind of being together in person, and that's important. But I do think there are ways to, I think it's around kind of language and energy and how you kind of convey energy in those kind of virtual...
Yeah, I mean, my one advice is like, if you want to collaborate virtually, don't keep your camera off.
Oh, yeah.
It's like really basic.
Yeah, we're not allowed.
Okay, thank you. But we do want to end this on a slightly energetic note. So I will do a very quick fire round with people here, just about 2 questions for each of you. 1-word answers are good enough, maybe 2. Let's start with Amit over there. 1 word you'd use to describe the future of design. Because we talk design and future all the time. What is that 1 word?
I mean, I would go back
1 word.
to 1 word called trust. Trust.
Trust. Okay, great. Freya, a boundary you most enjoy crossing?
When something's impossible.
Great answer. Cher, a non-human collaborator you'd love to design with?
A hedgerow.
Oh, wow. And Leo, the most unexpected discipline that has shaped your work?
Gardening.
Gardening.
Yeah, I feel like I took a few weeks off and did a bit of gardening about a year and a half ago, just after the big project I was telling you about, and radically changed my business plan as a result.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. On that note, we will call this session to an end, but I would request you all to probably hang back, and maybe if you can attend the next one, that's really exciting as well. We have invited an architectural poet and an architectural critic to deliver individual monologues in poetry and prose, which will meet dialogically through you in the room. So, yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks to each one of you. Thank you.
Thank you.